Pretty good. How are you?
I'm good.
How are your classes going?
Uh, half the time I forget. I'm like, today's Sunday. I probably should be doing something, but they're going okay. So technically, like, because I was telling you, yeah, switching into the program and stuff like that. I am only taking one class because since I don't have, so I'm in this weird gray zone where I'm an EDP student but without concentration, so
Mhm.
I cannot take the policy class. So I guess it is kind of nice to only have one class, but it is kind of weird. I don't know. I guess I kind of prefer the full time class rather than practicum and stuff like that. But I mean, the day program eventually, like it is more practicum than anything else. But wait, I don't. Are you? Where are you doing your practicum?
Oh, I'm in the CTAP program, so with DCYF.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Were you assigned to a particular office?
Yeah, just the I wanted to be at the Kent office just because that's the one kind of closest to my house, and I'd actually worked there in the past, and I know some of the people in the program that actually still work there from when I worked there, and mainly just because it's close to my house, and I didn't want to have to be going to Seattle for practicum if I didn't necessarily have to. But then we haven't been able to go in person because of the pandemic, so.
Maybe that's something we could talk about as social workers. Is talk about um I guess in general, like because a practicum is like an internship where we pay money to um again, so we basically are free labor, and I'm like, so I don't know exactly what they have you do. And so sometimes for me, I'm just doing a few of these things, and basically it's just like doing these jobs that really need to be done. Like they really need to hire at least three social workers to organize all of their things and have a better way of running the court and stuff like that. But because capitalism says that money is more important than those services, you know,
Yeah.
um, that's kind of why it's just a stopgaps of unpaid students, right? Where we just like rub elbows with networking, and that is the payment that we get is that networking, which I really hate the word, and it kind of turned me off from community building because networking is just basically, I feel, the capitalist version of like community building. Like it is nice to go to someone and be like, hey, I really like what you do and stuff like that, and building on that. But rather with this thing, it's just in the interest of you to get a job, not because any of that. I mean, there's nothing wrong for people that go to school. I mean, we all live in this nightmare world, um, and socialists, well, socialist social workers are kind of like that. And yeah, so I thought I did get to that cool book that I'll show you. I'll send you a picture. It's called Gender Trauma:
Hmm.
Healing Cultural, Social, and Historical Gender Trauma. I'm really excited to read it. Um, I Yeah, and because of it today, another thing, I don't know if in Auburn they also do this, but there's like in Seattle, I've noticed there's this like culture of a buy nothing. Do you know what a buy nothing is?
Yeah.
Yeah. So so I'm part of a couple different groups, and one of them is so I went there, and I met this person, and we started talking because they're counseling, and we're talking about all these things and all the different things that they're doing, and also how shitty their school treats them. Which I was just like, yeah, again, we're at a university where like we never talk about poor people. And like, okay, so there's this lady that yeah, you know about D'Angelo, right? Or Angela D'Angelo.
Robin DiAngelo.
Oh yeah, yeah, whatever her name is.
Yeah, the white fragility book lady.
The white fragility book lady,
Mhm.
who people buy her book to pretend racism is over, and basically her book erases a lot of class and like capitalist history.
Completely ignores that side of the equation.
Yeah, and her book is not even like, she like speaks of like you know all of like, oh, white people this and white people that, and like I get it, I know, but also at the same time, a lot of like, at least, people, and especially indigenous people, it's more of like, oh, it's, I love this thing that I once heard. It's like, um what your ancestors did, it is not your responsibility, but it is your duty to fix it,
Mhm.
and I think that's like, a collaboration together. So I think, yeah, and I read that she makes like 30K for speaking engagement.
Yeah.
In capitalism, you just write about the things that are co-opted, and then just make a lot of money out of it.
I think funny that you bring her up, but I believe she used to be a teacher or lecturer within the UW School of Social Work. I'm pretty sure that, so
Yeah,
I've read that book before, and I'm pretty sure in like the book's bio it talked about how she was connected with the UW School of Social Work.
really, I'm not surprised.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I do really like the point you brought up about yeah, internships or practicums not being paid, like we're just being exploited for our labor. And the UW like seems completely okay with that. I had to go to one of the online meetings for like my concentration, and one of the higher ups in the program was asked like, what are you guys doing to, so we get paid for our internship so we're not being exploited? And not going to name any names, but they were like, well, we've basically done everything we can but piss off these organizations, but we did get it so your tuition wouldn't increase, but we're not willing to really ruffle any feathers, so
Oh, and by
we're
the way, our tuition is more expensive than our
the day.
counterparts, the day program,
Yeah.
even though our program is targeted for working class.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what's up with that? And then I mean, it was just very revealing. So like they were saying, like I said, well, we don't like this, but we've done everything we could besides really like ruffle the feathers of these agencies who are exploiting you. So we're kind of okay with the exploitation, but we're gonna act like we're not. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's so funny, and I feel like the idea of like, Mark's idea of like wage labor theft. I don't think I've ever gotten the concept so much as with these internships. We're like, we have to calculate our hours, and we're not there, and we're like in person. I'm just like, okay, I worked on this for like, half an hour, but I feel like this is like maybe 3 hours worth of work.
Mhm.
Um, and it makes you really think of yeah, how silly. It's like, how do I measure this amount of work, and like why? So yeah, like it's, yeah, like even think about it, like it's not like an internship, it's just like, oh, do this. No, it has to also be measured. Everything has to be measured to make sure that it is productive and serves capitalism and nothing more, even in quote unquote, agencies that want to help. Like, really, so you're an agency that is, to her want to do social change, but you will be upset if your feathers will be ruffled if you aren't allowed to exploit students. So
Yeah.
that is it is, yeah, that is like it's like what it's like to even try and help things, and all the other people who just like seem to care more about how they look to like other people, and kind of like work all of the workers to death, if even if they
Mhm.
pay them, and then you know they get all the credit, and it's just, yeah, it's
I
basically
mean,
all about that.
yeah, and it's pretty revealing. I mean, it's the School of Social Work. You think they would be like fighting like hell to make sure people in the program weren't being exploited. And I kind of feel like if these organizations that we have our practicum with, if they can't pay us for our labor, and I'm not saying we needed to get paid like at an MSW level, but I mean, for God's sakes, at least like minimum wage, because if you can't pay us that, then like you it's either that or like you're exploiting us. And it's kind of like the same idea if a business can't pay their employees a livable wage, then they shouldn't be in business, and they shouldn't have us being exploited for our, internship labor if they can't pay us. I mean, it's that simple, and it's very like telling that they're okay with that in the School of Social Work, which is supposed to be all about, social justice and fighting for equity. And it just kind of seems to be like, at least the program higher ups and administrators, it's more or less all talk and no action.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like that's how I sometimes feel when I'm at meetings and I'm just like, what am I like doing here? I'm like, I guess like maybe try to radicalize from the inside. I did actually, I'm surprised. A lot of the students in like, my little student council group are actually, one of them sent an email that was just like, power and organizing. I was just like, "Ooh, okay, yeah, I'll see you there." And we played two truths and a lie. And so my two truths were like, I'm a published poet, and I met someone who has worked on the Diagnostic Statistical Manual 3. And my lie was like, I read That's Capital, which I will read, but this girl like told me, she's like, really, all of it? It's so long. So I guess with little hopes, I'm like, okay. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, even like if we look at, like more classic liberal education, like if you go into the gender studies department, and I'm not saying that, saying this is like way more like radical than, the School of Social Work, but at least every time of their website, they talk about Black Lives Matter. It is always there in our school. I'm like, I don't even know if I've ever seen a sign or anything that says Black Lives
Mhm.
Matter. It's weird. It's yeah, it is really, really, really not weird. I guess it's like it plays exactly into what they're doing. Um and it's not like the school doesn't have a huge endowment, and it's not like
Couple
everyone.
$1 billion.
Yeah. And we still have to pay like, so much money, and like, but we're not there. And and it's awful because then we also have to spend all sort of resources here, like I have to move somewhere bigger because I just can't do it anymore of living in a like studio and trying to do all of my work here,
Mhm.
because my brain is like, because of having ADHD, which again, capitalism does not care about accessibility, because
Yeah.
as long as you like, it's like, who cares about you? But for me, it's like I can't do this work here and then, trying to do my homework there and also live here. It's like, like when we used to talk about how like people would come to school after work, and at least the drive was like a kind of a transition,
Mhm.
and we don't have that anymore. And
Yep.
so we have to spend that, or we have to spend like, some people don't have computers, or they don't have fast internet, or,
Mhm.
and so we don't even get like a reduction in tuition to sort of like get money
Yeah.
to have more of these resources.
Yeah, I mean, that's like how, yeah, because all we're paying for right now, like thousands of dollars each quarter, is access to our Zoom classes, and then like the Canvas dashboard, and like the UW library system online. And that's it, really. And like you said,
Yeah,
the UW has, it's like a $2 or $3 billion endowment, which a big chunk of that is supposed to be helping students. I mean, it's just like somebody in the program said at one point, like colleges are corporations, and UW
I,
is acting like, in Amazon or an Apple, just trying to extract as much money as they can from us, even under these really horrible conditions, and they don't seem to care at all about it.
and I think, yeah, a lot of it again that has to, and I think that's why sometimes when I go to like departments like gender studies or sociology or anthropology, they are like more radical and critical about that. And I think in social work, I remember in one of her classes, it was like they were like, oh, we want to be more professional, professional, professional. And then also it was almost like kind of a cultural war started by Reagan. And I think he said something if like college shouldn't be free because, who should pay for you just to sit around and study like philosophy or gender studies. But these are things that help us think critically. So by taking this away, it's just like learn how to code, but
Mhm.
don't learn how to question.
Yeah, and just the idea of that in a capitalist system, it makes a whole lot of sense to charge or to put people tens and thousands of dollars in student loan debt, and then they're kind of beholden to that to a certain extent, and it's harder for people to radicalize, to organize, and to kind of think outside the box because they're worried about how are they going to, keep paying off that student loan debt. And
Yeah.
yeah, and like you said, they don't want people to be able to think critically. They don't want to have them develop that, critical thinking or reasoning skill. And I don't care what you're studying. Frankly, you should be paid to go to school. If it's just to
Yeah.
increase your
I mean,
knowledge, or
and
if it's to get a degree, to get a job, like we should be getting paid right now to be going to school. I mean, it's
I know,
ridiculous.
and that's the thing too. Not only that, like us and like other like instructors. So we've had sometimes bad sometimes not so good interaction with instructors, and it feels like the instructors don't care, and I like that is part of the responsibility, but I think it also speaks of like because a lot of them are PhD students of also the labor that they're being taken advantage of. Like if the school has the power to change this and to make sure that everyone's comfortable so they can like learn right, because how do you learn if you're worried whether you're gonna eat or where you're gonna sleep?
Hmm.
This is like the material things, and it's like, oh my good, I wish Angelina was here. We should have her next time. I need to talk to her about philosophy because I'm trying to understand that more. But it's like these people like with an idealism which comes from Descartes, who I hate, and I'm loving it more and more people. But his entire thing is just like, oh, everything in the world is because I think about it. And Marx's entire thing was just like, no, everything in the world is because of this physical world. So
Hmm.
in school, it feels like we're just, the ideas and the ideology, and we're like, we're going to talk about these nice things and they're going to happen. But there's no action behind it because they don't
Hmm.
believe in that material action. Or at least
Hmm.
that's how I feel. I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like some of the instructors within the program kind of have a more um, leftist or kind of radical ideology or thinking, and then there's kind of the more like button down liberal types who, I think to a certain extent, some of them have what others have described as like Trump derangement syndrome. Like we can kind of go back to sleep or go back to brunch because
Yeah.
Trump's out of office, instead of the correct conclusion is that Trump was the symptom. He wasn't like the disease himself. I think somebody had said like Trump is what a failed democracy like vomits up or something like that. And um I don't know. Yeah, I just think a lot of people like, oh, Trump's gone, Orange Man's gone, so everything's good. We don't have to worry about the kids in cages, or we don't have to, hold them accountable for promising the $2,000 stimulus checks if the Democrats win both Senate races in Georgia, which they did. And then there's some people trying to like do everything they could to like, no, he actually meant $2,000 total. Some people already got the 600, so you only need 1,400, and like trying to make this weird like math thing work. And I don't know. What do
I
you think
I
about that?
know. Okay, okay. Like yeah, and they threw out a very specific statement, and it was just like the most passive aggressive thing. I don't know if you said like the DNC would put out, and the stimulus 1,400 checks will
Mhm.
go to add up to the 600 that you already had,
Yeah.
and it's just like and I mean for me, this entire thing too is like so horrible because I feel like they're using a lot of this like just signaling, like being like, oh, this woman of color and stuff like that. And like for me, a lot of this identity of being a woman of color is really important. And like, thinking of someone like Harry Tubman, but then
Hmm.
Biden is just like, yeah, I'm working really, really hard to, have Harry Tubman on the $20 bill rather than, provide direct payments to people, especially people of color, especially African Americans, who are disproportionately homeless.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, Biden, sure, but make sure you give me. Oh God, I'm bad at math, but I'm like, okay, so 2,000 divided by like 20, it's like 100. So yeah, I'm like, okay, so that I need 20. I mean, I need
Hundred
$120
Harriet
bills. So
Tubman.
yeah,
Yeah.
not less, not less. Just do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay, yeah. So it's like he says $2,000 checks go out the door if Democrats win in Georgia. And then here is Newsweek trying to run cover for him. Joe Biden critics falsely claim president lied about $2,000 stimulus checks. And, which is funny because it's like, these liberal media outlets would, usually criticize Trump for his lies and bullshitting and gaslighting. But because there's a D next to Joe Biden's name, they're not, they're not willing to do that. And yeah, it goes to, I think that, like I was saying, that Trump derangement syndrome, which runs, really strong with a lot of people. It's like you can't even criticize Joe Biden. We're supposed to wait, like, I don't know, however long for him to follow through with the things
yeah.
he
Like,
said he
let
was going
people
to
enjoy things. I'm like, what? Let people enjoy suffering, or
do.
like let people who aren't like, yeah. It is this thing. It's just it just feels like, I don't know. I don't want to feel this way. In which like the thing about the children still being there, or women being sterilized without the consent, which has happened forever since um, women in Puerto Rico, in California, they basically like sterilized a bunch of Latino women,
Mhm.
because and it comes to like, I don't, it hasn't been mentioned in a while, and I'm surprised it kind of has fallen out of conversation. But Trump used to use the word, or Republicans used to wear the word a lot, anchor babies, and this idea that women who didn't have documents would come here and just have children to get onto welfare, and so their children would have citizenship, so then they could be like, oh, you can't take my kid like, they think that these people are conspiring this horrible thing where like it's not. I mean, like, okay, like I have a cousin right now, or not a cousin, my cousin's fiance, so she got papers and she moved to Kansas, and even though she has like documents which make her like less likely of exploitation than maybe someone who doesn't, but she's still like in Kansas working every day cutting meat,
Oh,
which
wow.
by the way is like one of the like these old packaging plants have it's where some of the worst
Huge
outbreaks. Yeah,
outbreaks.
and where they
Yeah.
were doing bets, and
Yep.
yeah, and this
I
and this
saw that. Yeah.
yeah, and this girl is like a tiny, like I'm really short and small, and this girl's like tiny and like with like very, very like, not to say that because she's tiny and thin that she's not, but and my mom was like, well, she's doing that. She's trying to like work really hard so she can pay taxes so the US government will allow her to stay and bring her husband here.
Yeah, and it's like that's a very dangerous job too, working in those meat processing or packing plants. And those workers are hugely exploited because a lot of them are, undocumented or have different, immigration statuses or whatnot. And those companies really exploit that and allow them to just be super exploited in a sense because they can't really speak up or they fear they might get deported or their family might get deported. It's really, yeah, really, really disgusting. And then yeah, I
Yeah.
did hear about that one company where the people were wagering like how many would get COVID and stuff, and I think they maybe got like a small fine or something like that. It's just like so disgusting.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I don't know too much about it, but remember the Reddit thing and stuff like that with
Yep.
yeah, and then
GameStop.
sudden it's like, "Ah, you're fucking up the market." I'm like, You guys literally make a movie glorifying white collar crime." I'm like, what about Wolf and Wall Street? Like, and you're like, no, you're breaking the rules. Like, we have we have rules and stuff, and suddenly now they apply.
Yeah, it only applies to like the small individual investor, but not to these Wall Street hedge fund people, because I listened to this former stockbroker being interviewed about the same thing, and basically what these hedge funds are doing is illegal, but the only way to kind of go after them for this form of, I think it's called like short selling, would be to charge them with like racketeering, because you'd basically have to go after kind of everybody that does it. But of course we don't have that kind of political will or capital to hold, these Wall Street banksters
Yeah.
accountable in any sense. And um, did you also hear? So one of the huge investors in Melvin Capital, which invested a lot in GameStop, was this hedge fund called Citadel, who Janet Yellen, which is Biden's Treasury Secretary, was paid like $810,000 to give speeches to this hedge fund. And
Oh,
Biden's press secretary was asked about that. It was like, is Janet Yellen going to recuse herself from this issue? Kind of seems like a conflict of interest. And Biden's press secretary, I think her name is Jen Psaki or something like that. She's like, no, no, she knows a lot. She's an expert. That's why she was paid all this money. It's not because she's very powerful and has all these connections, is now in the Biden administration overseeing these same hedge funds and Wall Street companies. It's because she knew so much. They paid her hundreds of $1,000s in speeches because she knew so much. It's not what it seems like. It's just a coincidence.
it's because she knows so much, even though there's probably, and that's the thing I love too, where everyone's like, oh, capitalism's all about competition rather than collective knowledge. Because, okay, Wikipedia, my favorite site and the downfall of my life because I spent reading on there rather than doing homework, but they're celebrating 20 years of it, and all of it is volunteer run. Is all these people coming together to work on this because they want to share their knowledge, or like us, or people that are on YouTube, or anything that they do because they really want to teach or talk to people. And it's like, we don't, it's not, and we might know a lot, but what we, our knowledge is not a commodity. Our knowledge is here
Mhm.
to share. My friend, I think in Seattle I've been lucky to meet very, very nice radical people who have like opened up my eyes. And one of them, I were at the library, and they like UW, and then we're like, I always feel guilty, about being, and they're like, don't, but if you do so, like, steal the means of production, steal the redistribute UW's monopoly of knowledge. And
Mhm.
I mean, I guess, will YouTube come after us if I say this? But it's just like, like I join websites that or Facebook groups that are called like, oh, ask for this PDF if you have institutional access.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm always just like, I'm like, if you don't have to pay for it, like, you shouldn't. And
Mhm.
I don't know, that's also why I always love looking at open source and stuff like that, because there's people who, it is their human nature to kind of work together and collaborate. That's
Mhm.
how a society is built, when we
Yeah.
think of civilization. And it's funny that, all of the old countries and people who live communally are uncivilized, but the civilization grew because of this community. And there's also this false binary where they're like, oh, there's no individual in, communism. No, no, the communism is like the welfare on, if the individual within the community. If
Mhm.
everyone in the community is doing well, every individual is gonna be doing well.
Mhm. Yeah, and I really like the point you made about how, universities and, other research institutions shouldn't be hiding this knowledge and research behind like a paywall. Like how like bourgeoisie and disgusting is that? Like you have to pay to get this research, often from a public university that was
Yeah.
funded through like our and others like tax dollars. But no, you have to So and some of these articles to get access to are like 10, 20, $30 sometimes just to
Or
read somebody's research. It's crazy.
it's like, yeah, sometimes it's like $45, and I don't think these professors are getting, a $45 check every time someone reads their
Mm,
article.
yeah.
No, they're not. Like, again, and it's just like with academic career, like for me, I really want to teach, but I'm so afraid of it because a lot of it is just like, how much can you publish? How much research can you publish, for cred, for like, and even though you're doing all this exhaustive work, like we're doing a research project only for 1 quarter and it
Yeah.
feels so overwhelming. So
Yeah.
imagine carrying out these research for years and you're doing it because you care so much, but all of this work is taken by someone else. And
Hmm.
if we notice, like most journals are kind of like owned just by a couple, like
Yeah.
Elsevier, like JSTOR, like usually when I like click get access from UW, it's usually like one of those sites that owns it, or like you remember being in school and all of your textbooks were like made in Texas, or
Hmm.
like like JFK
Yeah.
was murdered from like the Texas like building and stuff, and that's true. Like we all get our textbooks from Texas. Like why?
Yeah, I
Why?
thought a really funny thing. There is a couple of Republican House members in Washington State or the Senate. They wanted to introduce this bill that would like include in K through 12 education, teaching people about the ills and evils of communism. It's like really that's right now that's where your head's at after what 400 plus thousand people in the US have died because of capitalism's failures and its incapability of being able to address people's needs, both health and economic during a pandemic. So we have several 100,000 dead, but we need to be talking about the ills and evils of capitalism when it's been the most socialist and communist countries that have handled the pandemic the best.
I mean, yeah,
Countries
Cuba has.
like Cuba, I mean, they have handled it amazingly, and they've developed several different vaccines. They have
They're
like
literally sending
community
their
health
doctors
doctors.
around the world, and we don't talk
Yeah.
about like imagine, okay, like all right, if like the United States did that, I'd be like, oh my gosh, give them the Nobel Peace Prize. They're sending doctors out there. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
When in Cuba, like they're doing it and like they're not making even a big deal about it. But the media should be, which also reminds me too, if we want to do a little bit of media, hypocrisy, especially the New York Times. Dan, I never
They're
realized how
horrible.
conservative. I think. Let me see. Am I able to share my screen?
um
Okay.
let's see.
I let me try right now.
Okay, I'll make co-host.
Okay, host disable participant screen sharing. But if not, I can just ask you to go onto this website.
Okay, I
It's
made you a co-host. I don't know if that changed
Oh,
anything.
okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It did. It did. Thank you. Okay, so let's see. So I don't know if you do you know about fair.org?
Like it's about media stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah. I check in from time to time because it's really nice and simple. And they also have a podcast called like Counterpoints.
Okay.
And they love calling out the New York Times. And then, this is like my copium is going on to like fair.org. And I love this one. It's called New York Times China Syndrome because they're constantly just, piling on of China, China. Like
Hmm.
their doctors are like they're just have a firing squad for every doctor that decided to talk about COVID, which is completely untrue.
Hmm.
And in Florida, did you hear about the woman in Florida, Rebecca Jones?
Yeah, the
Yeah,
data scientist there who's kind of being persecuted by the governors. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
because they were trying to lie to their people, and they um and they were very violent. Like they held her family at gunpoint.
Hmm.
She turned herself in. So I was like, yeah, like the New York Times, it's like be like, oh, China, 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 China. I guess like we only criticize the whole China, 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 China thing if it comes from Trump, but not from um,
Biden.
oh yeah, or like, a liberal, non-thing. But let's see. um New York Times China syndrome. Imagine a parallel world where the US brought COVID under control in 2 months while China still struggle with it. A year and hundreds of thousands of deaths later. And in this alternative universe, okay, I want to highlight itself later. A leading Chinese paper runs an article on the US efforts to hide its missteps, which also funny is the New York Times because didn't Como just get in trouble for downplaying the number of deaths in nursing homes? Which
Oh,
is not,
really?
yeah, it's not just in New York. Like all the numbers that we see are without the numbers in nursing homes because there is a huge undercount of people who died in nursing homes. Like when if COVID first came here, no, I'm not sure if like I mean that it was like there was a facility, a living facility in Kirkland where it was basically decimated. Like I
Mhm.
think almost every resident die, all these patients die, and but because these are like older people and
Mhm.
because these are like people who might not be able to like be a good capitalist, a good
Yep.
wage slave, that they don't matter. So like who
Mhm.
cares if they die? That
Right.
and that's also well, I guess maybe later, but that, yeah, remind me of to talk more about the guy that he put on the committee who's like basically a eugenicist, who's like, oh, we should just have the like healthy people get the vaccine first, like because they're more likely to survive and still work. Like the old people, like just whatever they are. But so I like this website and I would recommend it to anyone because it's out of all like the media watch websites that I've seen. This one's really good. It's
Mhm.
kind of like very much more of like a fact checking thing, but
Mhm.
I love because they always make fun of the New York Times. It's like, oh, New York Times completely forgets its own reporting because they just put up an article that was just like how Trump, talking about Antifa, made it so that right wings could, go under the radar. I'm like, as if you didn't play a role in that, as if you didn't, demonize the Black Lives Matter protest and Antifa, like you were part of it, but you're now just want to be like Trump did it, and
Mhm.
yeah, so it's like their subhead is the Chinese Communist Party's efforts to hide its misstep have taken on a new urgency as the University of the world's first COVID 19 lockdown nears. Chinese has spent much of the past trying to spin the narrative of the pandemic as an undisputed victory led by the ruling Communist Party. I mean, I think if a country was able to build a hotel in like I don't know 2 weeks, I'd probably be like, that's pretty impressive because they did that. You
No,
know,
that yeah, China's handled the pandemic so much better than the United States. I would much rather be living in China right now than the US, frankly. And yeah, it's very interesting when these outlets try to demonize the Chinese Communist Party for all of its supposed evils, when in fact, the Chinese Communist Party think has like 91 million members and is like the second largest political party in the world. So you're what all those 91 million people are like these evil doers. I mean, it's like this capitalist spin and brain rot that these corporate media outlets like the New York Times puts out just never really ceases to amaze just how much propaganda it is. And yeah, that's why, yeah, I usually don't get my media sources from outlets like that unless it's to criticize and call out how
yeah.
ridiculous their news and analysis is.
I mean, yeah, I think sometimes it feels like Twitter is so much, but also it's nice because you get beat by beat news and basically a bunch of people being like, calling out all these like newspapers. And like I remember one thing with Rebecca Jones. I heard about it because someone on Twitter was basically wrote an article about her, calling her like a criminal betrayer, like or whatever. Like she's Edward Snowden. I mean, like every whistleblower, it's incredibly brave, and they're still punished. I mean, like Reality Winner, she's still in jail. Her
Yep.
mom is asking for a pardon for writing, crickets. And but every like media was just like either like fire data scientists or like insubordinate data scientists, and that's such weird scary language just because she decided to tell the truth, and they're trying
Mhm.
to make it seem as she was fired, so she was like angry or whatever, and so she did that just to get back at them rather than as a person who cares about people and public health rather than political games. And like that should be applauded, not be called an insubordinate, you know, uh, agent of some foreign state trying to kill us. She's actually doing more for us than anyone in office in Florida. She's done so much more just by doing that they ever will. And because she is able to do that, because it shows how much they're willing to let us die.
Yeah, and I mean it's what I think it'll be maybe like 500,000 deaths by some point in February or March, but it's like we need to attack the Chinese Communist Party, and we need to keep the sanctions and embargo on Cuba and Venezuela, and the sanctions on Syria and Yemen and North Korea. And it's like oh my goodness. Maybe we could talk a little bit about some of Biden's cabinet picks,
Okay.
because
Do you want me to look up someone right now? I could. Let's see what the internet says. Biden cabinet picks. I can't believe that he picked Pete Buttigieg. I was just like, I'm leaving the country. Come on, this is like an insult to injury. But and he's like the most like
yeah,
milk-toast like
yeah.
a person ever. And
Mhm,
then yeah, I think we talked about it. Like his dad was actually like more radical and stuff like that.
mhm,
And it was really funny. It's like liberals will be like, "But Pete Buttigieg, he did so much. He was the first gay," and that's not even true. I learned that Frances Perkin, who was the head of labor of
mhm,
the for FDR, she
yep,
was one of the first gay woman to be head of cabinet.
mhm,
And so that's completely erasing her. And not only that, it's also erasing labor history
mhm,
because, queer women and women also have, always been at the front lines too of like these social changes. So it's like, oh no, 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 there's the first one, and like in the 1940s. And I mean, she was like a really huge labor activist, like FDR's New Deal. Like she worked on a lot of that. So, and the fact that we don't really know, she doesn't get brought up a lot, and also again the fact that she was a hard labor activist, and that's I think why um, I don't think the FDR thing was perfect, but I think that's how they were able to be like, at least we gotta make sure that workers cannot be absolutely abused by companies.
yeah. And that was a result of a lot of, yeah, outside pressure by organized labor on the FDR administration. And like it's no coincidence that was one of the kind of strong points of the Communist Party and these other left-wing and progressive parties in the US. And we were able to get these New Deal policies, obviously not perfect with kind of the racism that was still
Yeah,
kind of implicit and explicit in it. But it's like, yeah, the labor movement is next to nothing at this point in the
they
US.
they absolutely, yeah, I mean they spent so much like just destroying it, like be like, okay, we'll incorporate unions, but you have to go by rules. I can't remember what's the name of this act. did we talk about this one where like, you know, it's literally illegal to strike in
Yeah.
solidarity,
Yeah.
and there's all these rules already, so they're like, yeah, you can have unions our way.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
or did you see the teachers in Bellevue? They were trying to sue them to go to school in person.
Oh, I didn't know, but it's not, yeah, not surprising. I saw that the Chicago teachers kind of voted to, yeah, stay remote until at least they could get vaccinated. I mean, Jesus Christ, if you're going to send them back there to risk their lives, at least give them the opportunity to get vaccinated. And it's very interesting, though, this large teachers union organization. I think it's the National Education Association, something like that. They were criticizing Trump back in April or March for him wanting to reopen schools very, quickly without any of these safety measures or kind of listening to the science on it. And then now they're praising Joe Biden for wanting to open them as quickly as possible. So I think unfortunately a lot of these labor leaders, the higher ups in these, labor unions and whatnot are very kind of beholden, unfortunately, to the Democratic Party and not really listening to their base. Like I would think if you probably polled most teachers and people in education across the US, they would probably still want to do remote until at least they could all get vaccinated or all these different measures. And it just, yeah, it's
And
kind
all
of
these
sad and frustrating, but not surprising, unfortunately.
parents were with on Valley were like praising the superintendent. They're like, yeah, like you get teachers who actually want to teach and are not afraid. And that's just so mean. This is the people who passionately want to, like, I mean, someone will throw out there, be like, a teacher probably makes 60K in Washington, like some bullshit like that. But anyway, these people do this because they want to teach, they
Not
want.
because they're getting rich from it.
Yeah. And then now they're like, the people are like, oh, we just can't take it anymore, like, with childcare and all this stuff. And like,
Mhm.
on one aspect, childcare it's really important for like working mothers, but it should not be put on the teachers. Your teacher shouldn't be like your childcare, your like nanny,
Yeah.
like a parental substitution. And not only is that like, abusing the teacher, but it like also goes into breaks these family relationships. Like, I'm not a parent, so I don't know how difficult, and it can be when, like, you're working and there too. But I just feel like, wouldn't be this a time to be like, take a breath, and like, I actually get to spend this time with them, and maybe I get to learn more about my kid,
Mhm.
and build a relationship. And rather than just like, oh, went to school, let's eat dinner, go to bed, do your homework, let's go drive to, I don't know, some like mall or whatever, and we're all good. And it goes from like the teachers to the family, and conservatives that were like, the family is the backbone. So like, where are you speaking about this?
Yeah, that's just until like the baby comes out. Like before
Yeah,
that, like, yeah, we're all about the family and yeah, sanctity of life, but yeah, you can fuck off once they're born. We don't really care about you after that.
yeah. It's like, oh, should have kept your legs closed. And it's just like,
Yeah. Well, and too, it's like the racial disproportionality on the kids who actually do contract the coronavirus and then have serious consequences and end up dying from it are kids of color, and they're going to be disproportionately impacted once these schools reopen due to the structural racism and all of these
yeah,
different systems. And it's like we could have avoided all this, just like pay everybody to stay home, implement universal health care, cancel medical debt, cancel student loan debt, cancel mortgage, cancel rent payments, give businesses the money to keep people on the payroll until like we've handled the pandemic, and then we wouldn't have hundreds of thousands of people dead and our economy and in shreds, except for the people at the top. It's just been more trickling up and concentrating wealth even more for the Bezos and Elon Musk of the world.
Yeah, and isn't there like a rule that you can't profit from natural disasters? But did we talk? I think you mentioned the word disaster capitalism, but I remember I think someone actually did write a book about
I
that
think
too.
Naomi Klein maybe or something.
Yes, I love Naomi Klein. I'll like send you the link. I don't. Do you like watching documentaries?
Yeah.
So it is on YouTube. Also, I mean, like maybe Will can put it on the link if people want to watch it. So it is on YouTube, and it's So she wrote a book called like the Shock Doctrine. Yeah. So which is like, um, and it's based on the Chicago School, like Milton Friedman.
Hmm.
Is he still alive? Is Kissinger still alive?
I
I think
think so, unfortunately.
my friend told me, Oscar, who yeah we should have here next time. He's like every time some other person dies, like Kissinger gets like another 10 years of life. But talking about him, he like engineer all of these horrible things, and so like installing Pinochet, which hurt the people in Chile to the point that they're still struggling with this.
Mhm.
And also, you know, then they decided to basically was just like neoliberal experiment and that, it was an experiment to them because it didn't matter
Mhm.
that it was not their people. And I mean, kind of the similar thing happened with like when the dissolution of the Soviet Union, during all this chaos, people were just kind of able to get rich, and that's kind of what they wanted, and they got that. And um, yeah, it's all about that. So she explains it so well, and she's a really really great writer, and I really like what she's talked about because I feel like she really knows about it, but she also like tries to not be bogged down in this like academic jargon or whatever. And um so I really appreciate that. There's a book, but the movie's also great, and I'll share that. Actually, I'll probably put it in the link afterwards. But yeah, let's see. So we've known that the Biden has picking his cabinet, and we might have a little bit of fun with this. So where do we want to start?
Well, the only decent one that I've heard of so far, I think, is his Secretary of the Interior,
Oh
Deb
yeah,
Deb Holland.
yeah,
Um, but besides that, all of the other picks I've seen have been pretty horrible, frankly. And then
yeah.
look, Secretary Agriculture, they used to call this Tom Vilsack guy like Mr. Monsanto or something like that because he's very tied into kind of factory farming and GMOs and Monsanto and stuff. Um,
Let's see. Tommy
so,
Vilsack. Let's see a little bit about your life. Let me. Okay. Can you see that better?
mhm, yeah.
Okay. So he was the president. Blah blah blah. I mean, and this is the thing too. If you look up a lot of these people, it's the same people. People
Yep.
from the Obama administration. People. Yeah, it's like basically half of like, is this Obama 2.0 or like
2 point or yeah, Obama's third term basically.
right, yeah. Oh, and I remember at the inauguration where like Bill Clinton, Bush, and Obama were all together, where I thought I was gonna have like a stroke. They're all like talking about democracy now is, and then they had Cornel West at Democracy Now, and I just love what he said. It's just like, Obama brother, like put down the crack pipe just because you put on a suit does not like take away from the fact that you're a fucking war criminal. I was just like, oh
Mhm.
my god, Colonel West, I love him so much. He just speaks the truth,
Yep. Yeah, he does it, and he does it in such a way that I feel like he is able to kind of get his message across to people who wouldn't usually listen, because he always couches it with like love, understanding, and kindness, with still like speaking truth to power, not taking any bullshit, you know.
Yeah, and I like that. I think there's also a clip, I need to find it, where like Colonel West is just explaining uh socialism to Tucker Carlson, and he's like, no, this is what I've been working with for socialism. And then Tucker Carlson's like, well, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
But like, okay, so let's look at this. Oh my god. Okay, let's start with the views on Iraq. That's always gonna be the fun one. Okay. Uh, let's see. He was just like, it shouldn't happen, but he hesitated for a meeting complete pullout.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, he's in the middle of the road of like, again, this like idealist, like liberal shit where it's just like war is bad, but we're not
Hmm.
gonna take any action about it, you know?
Yeah.
Security, energy.
Yeah, it
Tourism.
looks like, yeah, he was another Obama retread too.
Oh my god, the cornbreast Ethanol. He is from Iowa.
Hmm.
So he was appointment.
And yeah,
Oh, he was already appointed Secretary of Agriculture once.
looks that way.
I I don't know if like maybe there should be a rule where like you maybe you shouldn't be able to um go be the same cabinet person every time. Like I know we talk about the revolving door and we sort of get stuck in this, but it's like yeah, they go in, they go get like some super rich loving job, they
Hmm.
go back, and I mean that's how all these people conflate it together to conspire to make sure Bernie wouldn't win,
Hmm.
like everyone sold their soul. Funny for them, the only one who actually got a cabinet pick was Pete Buttigieg in Illinois.
It
Like
worked out for him, but yeah, not so much for Elizabeth Warren. Her little
no,
snake behavior didn't, yeah, get her much, did it?
I was just like, like if you just would have not sold out, maybe things would have been better.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh,
Corn Refiners Association, wouldn't that be like high uh, corn
fructose
oil
corn
and
syrup
high
type
fructose
stuff.
corn syrup, which
Yeah.
it's really not super good for you, and it's in
Mhm.
so much of our for drinks. I mean, sugar is not really that much better, but
Mhm.
to see like obviously cornflake syrup is in every soda, so they have such a huge market.
Mhm.
So they got an endorsement from this huge company,
Yeah,
and
and it said he was named Governor of the Year by the Biotechnology Industry Org and Industry Lobbying Group, which I'm assuming that has to do with like GMOs and supporting and pushing that stuff. So I doubt he's going to be much for, organic or sustainable agriculture. It's just going to be more subsidies to these, giant Monsantos and Cargills of the world, which are horrible for the environment, obviously, and then the people who are exposed to those chemicals as well.
yeah, and also it can be tied back to things like NAFTA and CAFTA. So in El Salvador and like Central America, where we've been growing our own corn for thousands of years, and
Hmm.
then when these trade deals happen, basically the United States is like, you can't use your own corn anymore.
Yep.
You gotta use the Monsanto corn. Oh, and by the way, every time you use this corn, you have to like pay again because it's
Hmm.
copyrighted. You, you,
Yeah.
your seed is copyrighted. A plant is copyrighted, right? okay, it's mind-boggling. It's not surprising, but it's still, you know, so absurd. And these are the things that are radical. But if you ask for like basic human rights, that's
Mhm.
radical.
Hmm. Yeah, and do you know who is the biggest uh, private owner of farmland in the United States?
Mm-mm.
Bill Gates, actually.
Oh my God. Can we
Yeah,
do it? Wait, you know my hate for Bill Gates, right?
I think so. I think most people, if they're like know about his like record or his like the horrible things his foundation has done, like abroad, or pushing charter schools, or how he's a
Yeah.
huge proponent of GMOs, or how him and his foundation basically control the World Health Organization. Yeah, there's a lot of dirt
Yeah.
we could talk
Yeah,
about
yeah.
with
And
Bill
he
Gates.
like he has the vaccine patents, which by the way, our taxes paid for those too. And look at it. These vaccine manufacturers get to keep the money. These
Hmm.
vaccine manufacturers
Yep,
are
publicly financed.
yeah, and then like now, I mean, with the Trump rollout, it was pretty bad. But now with the Biden, it seems even more chaotic. So,
Hmm.
and the great thing that is that they will have like, oh well, Trump left us a big mess, as if they don't almost have the power of a genie to just snap your fingers. Trump signed an executive order of a trillion, 15 trillion for Wall Street. That could probably cover most of our student loan debts.
Yeah.
You know, like, and the worst thing too, like if you get loan forgiveness, then you have to pay taxes on it.
Oh, really?
I think I'm gonna have to look at that, but I think so.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just really that's just the perfect encapsulation of what Biden's term will be, like his student loan debt thing. It's like $10,000 if you qualify, that has to go through Congress to get approved. But even though with the swipe of his pen, he could cancel all student loan debt, which obviously would disproportionately, you know, benefit people of color because they tend to, on average, have more student loan debt. So it's like also a form of racial justice. So you could get rid of all of it, which would
I don't
help.
want. I don't want to say this out loud because I'm embarrassed. But I think also being transparent about like how much money university can be and how much money someone makes. By the way, if people tell you don't tell someone how much money you make, it's rude. No, they do that so you don't know, and so you don't work together
Yep.
to like be on your bus. Like you're not paying us,
Mhm.
right? But I'm basically over $100,000 in student debts right
Yeah.
now. Yeah, and I guess I'll take 10K off if I qualify.
Yeah, exactly.
And then like, and I mean like that's 1/10. And even other programs like like social workers, even if you don't do the CTAP like during school, I think that if you decide to work for them for at least 3 years, they might, or like you get some sort of forgiveness. And there's all
Yeah.
these like, forgiveness programs, but they also make it really difficult.
Mhm.
Like I've had people tell me it's like, oh no, I kind of fucked up, so it's not gonna happen, even though they did the basic requirement, which was that they work for the public, for at least 10 years, you know? It's not, they don't even pay the amount of the time you went to school, like, for a year. No, no, no. I mean, certain programs do, like CTAP but even then, that's in all these programs just you go through these hoops and hoops and hoops, and we're social workers and we're so used to going through hoops, and it
Mhm.
still is unsettling. And I mean, I don't know, like I know we like no names, but like I had a classmate who, because they had such an intense workload and kids like they really wanted to do DCYF, but
Mhm.
they couldn't, and because they couldn't, then DCYF was also like, "Well, also give us back our loans."
Oh, I think I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
now I cannot. I guess I can believe it, but I'm
Oh,
like,
they're
oh,
just saying like, yeah, you need to pay us back like right now type of thing.
I think so. Which
Oh, wow.
it would be such a a huge strain, or maybe later on, but it seems really punitive. Like, maybe she didn't notice how much work it would be, or also like a pandemic fucking happened, you know?
Mhm.
It's not like she thought she was gonna be at home all, or that these or that or her kids were gonna be at home all the time. And so the fact that they're not even being flexible about it.
Yeah, it seems, I mean, and this seems like such a, like a tangible, concrete thing to organize around. And again, all it would take for literally him to sign something and that 1.5 trillion or however much student loan debt we have in the US would be completely vanished. It would be gone. Like, but why are we not like organizing about that? Why is the squad not pushing Biden to do that? Why is Bernie not pushing him to do that? Why is DSA not pushing him to do that? I mean, why are they not, I guess, holding rallies now around the Capitol outside, this huge like fencing that they now have around the whole thing? Like, I don't know, but I guess, is that even something with a lot of political pressure on him? Would he even cave and do that? I don't know if he would. I mean, for God's sakes, he said he would veto Medicare for all during the pandemic if somehow it passed the House and the Senate, like he's so horrible.
I mean, if that happens, maybe, yeah, maybe we should like, like, then we will storm the White House. At least we said it this time. We're gonna be a good on the FBI, but no, it is so true. You know, and like, yeah, the student loans things in an instant. But you know what's with the student loan, that then also
Be life changing for millions.
for millions. Imagine if people could get to work and do all these different things. And I haven't read much about this, but someone was telling me about this concept and that Marx created that's called like monocentrism, that in which capitalism we are kind of siloed into just doing one type of thing because
Mhm.
that will be our way of making money,
Yep.
rather than people getting to explore all these different things that could actually really help them flourish and just make their lives so much better, like, and your brain makes all these connections. These people are like, oh, because of like scientific hegemony of like, of this stuff, and because also we get our money from people like Paul Allen and Bill Gates, and that's again a way to control the poor, because they can be like, maybe we don't want to organize. We don't want to give money to the sociology people
Mhm.
because we don't really like what they have to say.
Mhm.
So here's some sort of a coding or whatever, and then they will go on and make profit from their foundation. Like foundations are businesses. Did
Yep.
you know that like a nonprofit hospital will make a bigger profit than a for-profit hospital?
I didn't, but it makes sense. Like Bill Gates, since he retired from Microsoft, he's increased his wealth many times over, even though he doesn't really work anymore. Yeah, definitely foundations are just a way for the very rich and powerful to increase their wealth, increase their prestige, all in the guise of doing, humanitarian work, when oftentimes it's doing the same things to benefit their kind of capitalist buddies and everything.
Yeah, it's like, okay, when you hear the word philanthropy, what do you feel? Because it always makes my skin crawl. I hate that word.
I like people trying to kind of whitewash their image, or yeah, make
Yeah,
themselves look better to the
yeah.
public for having such obscene amounts of wealth and power.
Oh, okay. That also reminds, and not only that, but it's like, for me, philanthropy too. It just sounds like I'm like, oh, and especially like, it's also kind of like also has like gender, um, structures to it, because it's just like, these wives and like a lot of these socialites, their role is basically philanthropy, to show their generosity, the sweetness of capitalism, that they're maternally they care so much, when to me philanthropist sounds like my hobby is for people. That's
Yeah.
it's literally it. It's just like my hobby is for people.
My hobby is to, yeah, pick and choose of the proletariat who gets, my crumbs, my beneficence.
Yeah. And again, it's just a way to control the poor. It's a way because, and I think we had some classmates talk about this too, where they're like, "Oh man, it's really hard to house this person because the way funding works." And when I was a homeless case manager, there was literally like a hierarchy of nonprofits. Like I couldn't get someone into a shelter because they're like, well, your nonprofit is not the nonprofit who has first like dibs on this. And I'm just
Mhm.
like, okay." And it was awful because you'd be like, yeah, you can't be there because you don't qualify into the specific thing. Like we have money for the opioid program. I mean, barely, and that's good. But there's a bigger crisis when it comes to meth. Meth is being used. I've worked with children. I work with adults. I work with people who are still struggling with substance abuse into like their elder years, and it's meth because meth is easy to find. It's
Mhm.
cheap. It it gives people energy because like how exhausted they are. And so like, but do we have a federal program that specifically treats people who are having a problem with meth? Do they get the same sort of like oh my gosh, you're finally it sucks that this happened to you, or like sucks that you're suffering through this. But no, it's just like meth is just like, oh no, no, you're just a meth addict, you're a meth head, and it's your fault, and you deserve all of this. And I mean, there's also like a lot of stuff. Oh my god, did you pull up democracy now?
Yeah, it was just about Biden's nominee. I don't know if they've been approved. They may have. This article came out on the 20th, but Biden's pick for head of, what is it, national director of national intelligence. Um, Avril Haines approved Obama's drone strike kill list and hid torture. So this person, that's Avril Haines there, yeah, was a huge fan and proponent of extrajudicial assassinations, meaning the president at that time, Obama, or Biden now, could pick off a name from a list. Yeah, go drone strike them in Pakistan, Somalia, Iraq, wherever, Afghanistan. No due process whatsoever. Even U.S. citizens abroad. I mean, we obviously shouldn't be doing that to anybody, but I mean that's just like
But like
disgusting.
the United States always plays, if it's like if it were another country, they'd be like, "How dare you? These are American citizens," and they'll like
Hmm.
go out of their way to have a diplomatic like meltdown.
Yeah.
And like even some people, like there was this girl from my high school town. I can't remember her name. Her name was Kayla, and she was from Nebraska, and she was actually in uh in Palestine to like because she felt she really wanted to help these people. Which, by the way, Israel is like number one in vaccinating everyone unless you're a
Yep.
Palestinian.
Exactly. Yeah.
Even
Medical
though,
apartheid.
yeah, even the people that lived on the illegal settlements, like is the Israelis who live in these illegal settlements, they can get the vaccine,
Hmm.
even though it's not under the jurisdiction. But anyway, yeah, it's just like that. We know almost cases said it was legal to put these names on a kill list. Just think about it, a kill list,
That's like,
like your government. You go to work. It's like, what are you say? Like, did you get it done? Did you come? Did you put the kill list together? It's like,
yeah,
hey, Wendy, when will I get that kill list? Could I have it by Monday?
yeah.
Oh, that reminds me of the I never watched that Office Space movie, but the guy in the meme, I will after this I'll try to make a meme for that. But yeah, and the fact that she again is gonna be in charge of it, and then there's a lot of this like liberal spa feminism where it's like, oh my gosh, this woman is the highest woman to like be a CIA director. I'm
Yep.
like, yeah, it sure is feminism as she dropped bombs in places where women are literally starving and trying to do everything to save their children.
Yeah, it makes me think of that meme, and which has kind of become reality now, of those people overseas. One of them says, "Yeah, I heard the next, whoever in the military industrial complex is going to be, pick a different identity. Like, oh yeah, I'm feeling so good that we're having diverse bombs, dropped on us now."
I know. Even in places like they were like, oh, there's so much more progressive. I remember one time in Germany, they're like, oh, we have our first trans woman, top like super general director. I'm like, oh, like okay. I don't know if that's really that's it's like people. It's sort of like this capitalism co-ops, yeah, like this idea of our identity, which is really important to us and we're trying to reclaim from capitalism, but capitalism won't let us. So this is where you get your you know like light feminism and stuff like that, where like or people being like, oh my gosh, he's gonna lift the ban on transgender people being in the
Military,
military,
yeah.
which I mean, I guess for discrimination's sake, sure, but then also like why? Or it's like when people say like women are lucky because they don't get conscripted. I'm like, well, I don't think you should get conscripted either, homie.
Hmm.
Sorry.
Yeah, and we basically just have like a poverty draft in the US. And I guess pretty big part of the military's recruiting tool is saying that if you join, we'll get rid of your student loan debt. So I think they're probably even working behind the scenes to make sure that doesn't become a reality, because then they've lost a huge part of their, recruiting tool. And I just found this article kind of interesting because, Biden talks about how he's going to listen to the scientists, but his different parts of his administration, this article said, issued dozens of oil drilling permits in first few days, but he's going to listen to the scientists, even though he's repeatedly said he doesn't support a ban on fracking. He wants us to get back into the Paris Climate Accord. Like, that's like a small step in the right direction, but that's not doing nearly enough. And that's kind of like, that's very Biden-esque, like these very small tweaks, usually positive around the edges, but not really facing these issues like head on with any type of urgency or adequate policy response.
Yeah, and it always we talk about environmentalism and like how much we care both like within the Democratic Party and even in our state. And so they're trying to pass a gas tax that will be up to like $1 per gallon, but it's regressive because it's going to affect the people who drive and work into the
Mhm.
city. Like we should have these taxes and use them to like combat it, but it should be the multi-dollar companies. Why us?
Yeah,
Why?
or like instituting maybe an income tax so people like Jeff Bezos and Amazon and Bill Gates and all those, rich capitalist assholes pay their fair share, because as you were pointing out, we have a hugely regressive tax system in Washington state, and it's the working class and the poor that feel the brunt of it. And then I just wanted to play this quick clip from Bernie, because he's even,
Yeah, I'm sorry. I do love this person's bio. I just saw it. Jeff Bezos made 50K and one child
yeah,
die of hunger by the time you finish reading this. Oh
yeah.
my god.
No, I just found them on Twitter too, and it's like Bernie again is kind of acting like a sheepdog for the Democratic Party and not calling out Biden for this.
Dollars that we already allocated out to every working class family in this country and to their kids as well. People are struggling to put food on them. We've got to get checks of 1,400.
So he's pushing the whole like 1,400 thing too, even though he was saying this November 12th. Senate needs to pass a real stimulus package now that provides $2,000 a month to the working class, $600 a week to the unemployed, and expands all Medicare to
Yeah,
like
I mean,
what happened, Bernie?
it is like a 15-minute video, so I guess I would like to watch more of it. But I'm not a crazy Bernie fan, but there is something that I do. But it is there is a lot of disappointment too with like, I know Bernie really, really wanted Trump to lose, but this whole thing of like, oh, vote Biden. Like I wrote in Bernie and people were like, you shouldn't do that. That's not what Bernie would have wanted. I'm like, I don't care what he would have wanted. I care
I
what
didn't
I'm
I,
gonna do.
and I didn't want him to like drop out and completely capitulate to Joe Biden without getting any policy concessions, yet he did that.
Yeah, and even after all of this, they're still like, yeah, it's like maybe you'll be labor secretary. It's like, just kidding. And they didn't. They picked no one, even though what a snake. At least one could have been somewhat of a difference, but no, nothing, no one. That is, like all these people. Like I don't know, maybe I'll later for us. I'll like try to make a video and have them all be like, this is what they used to do, this is what they used to do. And it is a revolving door. Like it's gross. I don't think you should be able to work there if you already work there, and especially if you already went out there and lobbied. That's how is that correct? And that's another thing too. I really want to do more is read about like the dark money, because I know that's or what is it, Citizens United, in which like there's all these things which make there's more and more rules, so there's no transparency. So we don't know. I don't remember if you like when we're watching. I can't remember what was going on that day. There was just like a White House thing, but there is this guy from Rhode Island who I love, and I cannot remember his name because he was just like the one who was just like, this is dark. He had like a chart and everything, and people were making fun of him because they're like, they're like, oh, what is he doing? Oh, here it is. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, and he is really, really into like dark money. He's like, so, it looks like this company was united with this company in the same building. Hmm. So he seems, yeah, it's kind of like, there's people who will like talk about how progressive they are, but then their voting record says otherwise. And then there's people who are quietly doing the right thing.
Yeah, even Bernie, I believe, voted for Avril Haines, that person who approved or Obama's drone assassination list and supported torture. Like Bernie voted for them, like, and Elizabeth Warren and everybody else, and I think they also supported Biden's Secretary of State, who's also a huge warmonger, who's still defending the U.S. war and intervention in Libya, even though like that brought slavery back to that country, and before the U.S. got involved was, I think, the most prosperous country on like the African continent, and supports the war in Syria and the sanctions there. And he was being interviewed during his confirmation hearing by people like Marco Rubio and Lindsey Graham, and basically agreeing with them on, saying that Iran's the biggest sponsor of state terrorism
Oh
in
my
the
god.
world, and wanting to continue to support sanctions on Venezuela that have killed tens of
Yeah,
thousands
and,
of
and
people.
Iran too, like I'm just like, it is radical to put sanctions in the middle of a pandemic. It is criminal. It is, if we ever do have or a change in the world, I want a tribunal court just like with the Nazi trials for what happened during COVID, because it is genocide. It
Yep.
is Navajo Nation, elders who speak their language are dying off. So guess what? Their language is gonna die off.
Yeah, I mean, MLK, when he was alive, he talked about how the United States was the biggest purveyor of violence in the world, and that's something he couldn't stay silent about. And like that's even more true now. Even like, yeah, the sanctions are a form of economic warfare, and they're
It
like,
is.
they're war crimes, and it affects the most vulnerable and marginalized people in all these countries that the US empire doesn't agree with their ideologies, or because they're wanting to, kind of chart their own path
Yeah.
for what's best for their citizens in their country. And it's like, yeah,
Oh,
super disgusting. You're not really a leftist, you're not a progressive, even though progressive is a very kind of vague and amorphous term, but you're not a leftist if you're not an anti-imperialist. And
yeah.
a lot of people, especially in elected office, I think, really lack that type of critical analysis of US foreign policy, or at least they're not willing to, kind of put that critique on record. And I think, that goes to a large extent to Bernie and the squad, unfortunately, too.
Actually, the Bernie's foreign policy is actually what made me write his name in. Um, when Bolivia happened, but I mean, his tweet was a little on the soft side, but he was the first person in AOC to be like, I think there was a coup d'état in Bolivia when it
Mhm.
first the day that it happened. No one else did. And this is more of a historical thing, and maybe it's just symbolic. But when he was mayor of Burlington, and Reagan was waging war on the Sandinistas, Bernie was just like, I'm setting up my own office of foreign policy, and he went to visit and talk about the Sandinistas and all this amazing stuff that we're doing.
Yeah,
But
sorry,
oh
go ahead.
no, you go ahead. Yeah, that was basically it.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna say, I think the US still has sanctions on Nicaragua because of their socialist Sandinista front government. I mean, it's like, yeah, oh, I just thought, yeah, I mean, yeah, I think if we lived in a sane like society and had a decent like functioning politics, then like AOC, Bernie, those types would be seen as centrist, because frankly that's what they
Yeah,
are. They're not the
yeah,
radical leftist, communist, socialist that, the Republicans and conservative media like to point them out as being. Um, but like that's how far right wing our politics is here in the United States. And that's something that, Chomsky, I've heard him talk about numerous times, that in
yeah.
any other kind of functioning society or country, like the Democratic Party would be seen as a pretty far right wing party.
Yeah, I mean, like in a lot of these Western societies, it is like that. But like, yeah, our parties, like, they have just some of the most like regressive, punitive ideas. Like, I just want to also make a collage of Biden talking about how proud he was about the crime bill that ended up criminalizing millions of people, and still dealing with that. Yeah, Biden, why how about your executive order should be, oh, maybe all these people should be out and I should like give them reparations
Yeah.
for my mistake. Maybe
Hmm.
that's something he should do. I think that, especially since Biden touted so much that black people loved him, that he had the black vote, which was just such a disgusting thing, like he was just like, yeah, I do well, and then it's like, okay,
And
like,
his solution to the, Black Lives Matter movement is to give the police more funding and resources.
I know this like whole terrorist and domestic law thing is just like, oh
No,
my
that's not
god.
what we need. No, we already have more than enough tools and resources for the government to
Yeah.
spy on people, collect massive amounts of data and all that stuff. It's like, no, we don't, because that, again, that stuff's always used for people on the left, people critical of capitalism, US empire, people standing up for, Palestinian human rights, people standing up against US foreign interventions wherever they happen to be,
Yeah.
people, yeah, protesting whatever from a leftist perspective, it's always going to be used against them.
I mean, once MLK became more and more socialist, that's kind of when they're like, we might take him out.
Hmm. FBI was sending
FBI.
letters telling him to kill himself,
Yeah.
and yeah.
Oh, one of my favorite actresses, Jean Servig. I don't know if she maybe mentioned her before. She was an American actress and spent most of her time in Europe. But then the FBI basically bullied her and blacklisted her. No, she never got a job again. And she unfortunately took her life because it
Oh,
was so
wow.
horrible. And do you know why they did all of this? Because she gave money to the Black Panther Party.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're like, oh, all this like white supremacists and domestic terrorism. I'm like, you can't catch them all, but you basically destroy an entire group who was for their own self defense in like less than a decade. It's like,
Hmm.
okay, but not surprised, but
Yeah, and I think
definitely.
it might have been, I think J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI at the time, was saying how the most dangerous part of the Black Panther Party was their free breakfast program, which they instituted, and that was kind of brought into the public school system. But it just really shows like that's like what the US government thought was the most harmful aspect of the Black Panther Party, them feeding kids who wouldn't otherwise be getting that food at home. It's like, I mean,
Yeah, I
Jesus
mean,
Christ.
even in Seattle, like, the police and parks department will come and to be like, you gotta get out of here. You don't have a permit to be here, even though it's people bringing like communal food for
Mhm.
anyone that wants to come and get it. And they're telling them, like, no. Or it's like, you always hear the stories about like nuns or like priests who like basically are jailed because they're like, talking to homeless people and offering them food because they're like, you don't have a food permit.
Yeah, it's like really that's where we need to be directing our tax dollars to go penalize people for trying to help
Well, it gives
hungry,
more money.
unhoused people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it gives more money to the prison system though, so that's a good incentive.
Yeah, we need to defund the police, defund the military, defund the whole carceral system and invest that back into the communities that have been devastated by that. Obviously, domestically and then internationally too, because I mean, that's where a huge chunk of our tax dollars go to, is to the military industrial complex that harms and kills so many black and brown people all over the globe. And it's like,
Yeah, let's just
no wonder why so many people abroad hate the United States, or at least the US government. I would feel the same way. I mean, I feel the same way, and I live here, it's
no.
disgusting.
I feel it too. It's just it is like, and sometimes it actually for me, like the idea of collective trauma, and because that's my thing in social work, it all has to do with like me not being able to deal with the fact of all these things the United States did, and and it is that, and the horrible thing is like the fact that leftists don't pay attention to that because that is kind of a root of a problem in and of itself. Like if we
Mhm.
didn't destabilize countries and you want less immigration, maybe that would be a reason. Maybe if, like, you didn't destabilize their countries. Like, do you think people just want to leave their culture, something that they've known each other, their family, especially in other places where like the family unity is so important, just to come here and fuck your life up? No,
Mhm.
they have to, because
Yeah.
we fucked their country.
Yeah, and not to be like a Osama bin Laden apologist or anything, but I believe he said one of his reasonings for wanting to attack the US was because of the US bases in Saudi Arabia, in his homeland, in this very, you know, kind of highly religious and kind of sanctified place. We didn't really think about that. No, it's just like, yeah, let's go start the war on terror. Let's go demonize and torture Muslim people, both domestically and internationally. And then, yeah, I think, what you were talking about, a lot of this like collective trauma, whether it's, stuff around mental health or substance use or misuse, would be drastically less if we didn't live in such a capitalist hellhole of a country where people's material needs were taken care of, and that was placed as being more important than making profits. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
I just think of how everybody's mental health would improve drastically if everybody had health care, housing, income, access to mental health services,
Yeah, I
like
mean,
just these basic human rights.
yeah, the reason why we have, substance abuse or people who are like, are alcoholics, even though so alcoholics themselves are demonized, but alcohol itself is not,
It's
because
promoted.
yeah, because it's so legal, yeah.
Yeah.
But in a lot of these people, they might have like anxiety or dealing with all this trauma, and they try to go to the doctor, and they're like, we're not gonna give you like benzos because we think that you're a druggie, or we're not gonna treat your, oh, you came here because you're having like delirium tremens and you're about to die, and they just treat them like shit. And so it's like, why go back there when they make it so hard and it's so
Hmm.
expensive, when it's just easier to me to go buy a bottle, when it's just easier to me to smoke,
Hmm.
because that's how it is. And so like, how much more would we have? Or like, we talk about prevention being like the number one in healthcare, right? Well, wouldn't the best prevention would be having healthy, like environment and
Hmm.
food and housing, and you know people don't thrive under hardship.
Yeah, but capitalism thrives on people being in these very precarious situations, not having their needs met, not being able to have the time and resources to, contemplate of how we could create, a more just and sustainable world. Like people obviously, yeah, like you're saying, they don't thrive on that. They suffer greatly, but the capitalism thrives on that. Like they want people to
Yeah,
be job insecure. They don't want people to have health care because they want them to stay in these shitty jobs
yeah.
to keep their health care.
And that is
Yeah.
so contrary to also like the freedom of not having to be a, a wage slave. Like like a lot of people are like freelance, or like they run their own little business, and it's just one business. It's not like they're running an entire business, and it's so hard for them to get health insurance, like Medicare or whatever, because they make too much money. But then if they try to buy insurance themselves, it's just like,
It's exponentially
yeah,
expensive.
it's
Yeah.
basically they're like handcuffing us to a job.
Yeah,
Otherwise, yeah,
yeah, and we spend more than any so-called like developed or industrialized country on our healthcare, yet we have tens of millions of people without health insurance. We have fairly high rates of infant mortality. We have tens of thousands of people dying each year because they don't have access to medical care. We have people going bankrupt. Like you ask somebody about that in any other country, like what? You could go bankrupt if you get sick? Like you must be fucking joking. But like
yeah.
that's how like depraved the US is, and it's not surprising that we have the most COVID deaths, frankly, either.
Yeah, and it's like this thing too, like another industry, right? Like if you don't have enough money to pay your hospital bill, which is insane, and eventually like they only give you 30 days before it's sent to collection. It's fucking crazy. Can we send the Democrats into collections or whatever? Because but that's just another industry. They sell what you owe to collections. Like, and one time my landlord was just like, yeah, I really would like you to talk to these people because we got stuff about, like, collections email me, like, mail my landlord. So then they got, like, involved, which also, like, fuck all landlords. And I was like, yeah, I'll do that. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. Like, and, and it's like, yeah, or the fact that they make it easier for corporations to declare bankruptcy, but you cannot declare bankruptcy
And
on someone
Joe
else.
Biden was the big reason why we can't do that, actually.
Yeah.
Of course.
Oh no, of course. Of course, and it's so gross. Like even, you know, like I guess like not to bring her up because I feel so bad and I hope she's not being harassed. But like Tara Lee, the
Ter-
the woman who
who
came
accused
out.
Biden?
Yeah,
Ter-
and
yeah.
and then she was just treated as like, oh, it doesn't make sense or all this
Mhm.
stuff, as if and it's just so gross. It's
Yep.
just so absolutely gross. And people are like, oh, Joe Biden and the first like black, vice president. And like, you guys ever watched the Clarence trial with him and Anita Hill?
Mhm.
He basically used Anita Hill for political reasons. Then he made a deal with the Republicans, and basically this woman got to it's like suffer, was re-traumatized, was called like horrible names, asking if it was just for attention.
Mhm.
And then she trusted Biden because Biden's like, this is a good thing for justice, and she just used it as a pawn.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
I
I definitely tend to like believe her because like there's a lot of things that like corroborate her story, but I thought it was like, the whole Me Too movement was very, important to these, liberal pundit and celebrity types, but that all went out the window when it was their candidate that was credibly accused of sexual assault. So I guess it just became at that point vote for the lesser of two rapists in their mind,
right,
right?
yeah. And it's like, yeah, it's like, do you think these people, these women want to come out and talk about this? No, it's awful. But I
Yeah,
think for them sometimes it is like this, moral duty they feel. They're like, maybe I should say something before, like, they get elected, because maybe they don't know who this person really is, and they do it just for that. And and then like, Dr. Ford, was it because of Kavanaugh?
Kavanaugh,
She
yeah.
had she had to move like 5 times because she
Hmm.
kept getting death threats.
Yeah, and like, yeah, it's like, no, these people aren't doing it for their own benefit. These people pay a heavy price when they come out, with their stories of rape or sexual assault, whatever it is, against these powerful men, and they pay an immense price, and oftentimes their accusations are completely swept under the rug, ignored, or discredited. And then how do you think that makes other people feel who were in that position or thinking of coming forward? And then they see how they've been such viciously attacked by politicians or the media or whoever. It's disgusting. Like, you say, like, hashtag me too, and I believe in all women, like, then you should be consistent on that.
Yeah, no, it's if the person's likable, or if the person is someone that is not Trump, it then you're fine. Or look at, I mean, two things that Trump did that I'm sure the Democrats are so happy about. One is designating Jerusalem as Israel's capital. And has Trump even made a peep about that? No, they're not going to change it back. They've been wanting to do that,
Hmm.
but Trump did it so they could wash their hands clean.
Yep.
The Iran nuclear deal, oh, all this criticism of like Trump and the Iran nuclear deal, and we must join it back. And now, Iran's like, okay, we're waiting. And then I think Biden's like, I don't know who this dude was or whatever, but he was just like, you're not gonna pressure us. We will get to you when we get to you.
Yeah, and I did see an article talking about Biden and his administration's approach to rejoining that, and it's basically they're wanting concessions from Iran in order for the U.S. to even think about rejoining that, even though Iran was in complete compliance when the Trump administration unilaterally pulled out of that deal, and Iran is basically saying, no, like, fuck you guys, you need to end the sanctions and rejoin the deal. We're not going to deal with like your bullshit. And they're right. And I think there's going to be some, I think, presidential or some type of elections in Iran happening soon, and there could be more kind of a hardline people in power because they see how fucked up the U.S. has been towards their
Yeah,
country, making it less likely for them to rejoin. And it's like,
yeah.
yeah,
But if they don't rejoin, it's like, oh, you don't want to join? You want to be like a bad player? You don't want to get along? I'm like, you were a jerk to me first, and I've been reaching out for like 5 months now, and now you're telling me something else.
Hmm.
It's like that. It's like abusive relationships between countries.
Hmm. Um, been chatting for a while now. How about we end it with maybe something positive we see happening in our community or the broader world? What do you think?
Yeah, I think, well, the Teamster strikes, the T-shirt strikes. I think there's might be I don't want to get too hopeful, but there might be a movement bubbling. There might be a chance if there's enough like movement to maybe start creating more and more strikes, normalize
Hmm.
the strikes, and then eventually build up to this thing where we paralyze everything. And I feel like now people are more likely to engage with that, because before it was just like so scary. So that's a hope. For me, another thing that I often think about is just how much mutual aid like popped up
Yep.
and raised
Yeah.
during like um during 2020, how people have helped each other. Even on Twitter, I usually like had never interacted with people from Seattle, and now I have all these friends because they're like, oh my gosh, we're all like in the community, and we want to do something better. So for me, the community thing and just that, and I'm excited to read this book. I'll let you know how it is, but yeah, it's very exciting. What about you?
Yeah, definitely like the mutual aid is really amazing. And like you said, it has been really, um, seeming to increase and build kind of more community and just helping meet the community's needs because the state actors aren't doing it. And definitely something I want to try to get more involved in. And yeah, something else I found positive was I saw this story how the city of Austin, Texas. They defunded their police department, at least to a certain extent. I don't know the exact numbers, but then they're using some of those funds to, I think, buy or purchase a hotel to house homeless people. So I was like, that's awesome. That's what we mean by defunding the police. Defund the police and invest in programs of social uplift that improve the material conditions of people's life, whether it's housing, jobs, education, mental health, whatever. Basically, any other use besides giving the police more money would be, better serve the community and the people in it. So
I know I am so excited about that, and also I'll share this video that The Intercept and Naomi Klein did. That I watch it sometimes when I feel a little bit sad because it's really pretty, but it's very hopeful. So I'll send it to you. I think you'll really like it. Maybe I'll share it to the group on
yeah,
our class. I think they might like a cheering up. But yeah, this was great. Yeah, it flew by, but I feel like we definitely got to cover a lot of things that had been happening, and hopefully, yeah, we're gonna keep an eye on that because we're not going to let them, you know, just slip away.
yep,
Not
exactly.
this
We'll, we'll
time.
we'll try to hold them accountable in our own small way.
Yeah, and as a community, we're doing it more and more. So I think
Hmm.
we're getting stronger every day.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll definitely have to do it again, and yeah, maybe try to have Oscar and
yeah,
whoever else wants to join.
yeah. I know it would be fun. We have so many classmates who are amazing and know so much. I feel like with the School of Social Work, it's really depressing with administration and professors, but
Hmm.
what has been such a light line has been, or like classmates is they are just they all work so hard together to like we're like fuck this school, they're taking advantage of us, so we're
Yep.
gonna work together, and we're gonna and at the end, for me as a social worker, your loyalty is not to a school or to the government or to a nonprofit. Your loyalty is to other people, and
Yep.
that's it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely have a really great, like cohort. And it'll be nice to be able to hopefully at some point before the program's over, see people in person, but time will
Yeah,
tell with
time will tell. But yeah, well, awesome. I will talk to you later, and
that. All
yeah,
right.
just a link me with this one is up. I love this one. I felt like I was more coherent too this time. It's like it feels like a little bit better each time that I like it.
Yeah,
And now,
this takes like practice to like
yeah.
talking through this like format and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, and then also cool because now I feel like, oh, maybe I will be looking more at the cabinets because I'm like, I love digging deep. I'm like, oh, look at this thing that happened in 1993 when you decided that it was okay to bomb a hospital. Okay, and let me keep that. Let me get
That,
the receipts.
that might come in handy at some point.
Yeah, yeah.
All
Well, you
right.
have a good night.
Yeah, you too. Take care.
Goodbye.
Bye.